crash course. It was like a 4-day crash course, and we slept in shifts. So actually, Heather, I'll start with the Lichens video actually. But so it was a group of 4, and it took us 4 days to make this video. And what they do is they bring grad students in and they train you on storytelling and filmmaking, and then they pair you with a client. And the client was, in this case, a scientist in Montana, and you have to make a video for them describing their research. And this is just after submitting my dissertation. Now I'm in a crash course where I'm actually sleeping in shifts with other students. It was totally, I don't recommend doing it during that particular period of your life, but I do recommend the class. The class was really amazing. So it's like a 3 or 4 minute video. I don't know, Heather, if you can share it now. Cool.
My favorite thing about lichens is that they're always out there. So anytime you go on a walk, you go on a bike, go float the river, you can go out and collect lichens in the middle of winter. When you're skiing, you always see lichens. So lichens, they cover about 7% of the Earth's surface. Crusty lichens, big leafy macro lichens, hair lichens, big, huge lichens, and some lichens that grow really fast can grow up to 3 feet a year. And you got ones that grow really slowly and live for 10,000 years. As a photographer, when I'm out there poking around, I just see colors, I see shapes. I've got over 16,000 collections of lichens here currently. A studio photography setup where I can go out and collect lichen samples and bring them back to the lab here and set them up and control the lighting. So historically, a lichen was assumed to be a union between a single species of fungus and a species of green algae. But when they come together, they form this unique structure, unlike the 2 individuals. The algae photosynthesizes, and the fungus produces the structure, and those 2 come together, and they live in places where the individual parts alone couldn't. And that's what we thought of lichens for the last 150 years. The study was accepted in Science magazine, and Toby, the main author in the paper, approached me and asked if I would do a photo for the cover.
This person, Toby Sprirbilla, walks in. I don't know what he said. "Hi, I'm Toby. I work on lichens." I said, "Please sit down." And so Toby brought me this problem. He said, "Hey, look, these 2 lichens that were clearly different."
But when we looked at their genes, they were exactly the same.
Native Americans used the edible horsehair lichen, it's that brown stuff hanging from trees, and essentially make little Cliff Bars.
They knew that one was yellow because it contained an acid called volcanic acid, and they knew that that was toxic.
You're sort of left with this problem of they are different, but we don't see it. So what is it? That's the problem.
We were stuck thinking about this idea of one fungus, one algae, which is how it's taught in textbook.
It was totally wrong. It was absolutely wrong.
But what we found was that there was a third layer, a separate, distantly related fungi that was an integral part of the symbiosis. It took us realizing that to change how we thought about the symbiosis in general. We looked for this additional partner on 6 different continents, and in every case we were finding it.
It started as a small project in Montana between a couple of people with different backgrounds and ended up as this global endeavor.
So without the whole group working together, we never would have been able to study the organisms that have to work together.
Sometimes big discoveries can come from really simple questions. It's a good reminder to keep an open mind.
Thanks, Heather. So yeah, that was one of the first videos I made. right before I launched my business and decided to do this full time. And that was a really fun project. It was my first time using like a real camera. I'd upgraded from the GoPro situation and worked in a team and really got the training. That class also really helped build a network of other filmmakers who I still work with now. It was a good combination of people with a science background and people with more of a filmmaking background who wanted to get into the science part. And so I've been doing projects with some of those people since then. So after that, I launched Tiny Beaker Media. I don't think that I do recommend launching a business right after being a grad student. I think I would recommend having like a savings account. But that's what I did. And I decided I wanted to build a brand that was cute and fun science content instead of maybe the more serious stuff I felt like pressured to do as a scientist. And so that's a lot of what I do now. I think there are a lot of skills that you get as a PhD student that are really great for launching a business though. So like, depending on how well supervised you are, as a grad student, you have to sometimes come up with your own ideas. Project management is a big part of being a grad student, time management. Also getting money, getting grants. All of these things are things that I use now as a science communicator that I used before. In addition, like as a scientist, I have a connection to scientists. I have like a deep understanding of how the work happens. And all those things have been super helpful as a filmmaker and a media producer now. So I think, yeah, sometimes it's hard to, and being self-motivated is also a good one. I think sometimes it's hard to know, like as a grad student, or at least I really struggled with how to make my resume, which was science, how to market that for outside academia. So there are a lot of general skills that you gain as a scientist that are like super helpful. And so let's see, from there, I got a National Geographic storytelling grant, which is something that's open to anyone. The cool thing about that is Nat Geo does science grants and storytelling grants. So even if like you're continuing in science, not communication, you qualify for these grants. And there are different levels depending on how much money you need. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about that. If people have questions about the Nat Geo is its own, like NSF, actually Nat Geo is its own beast in terms of like applications. But the story for that one was kind of cool because as a scientist, I was doing a bunch of research in a country called Kiribati. So actually, Kelton was on this cruise. So we went on an expedition to the Phoenix Islands protected area and did a bunch of research. That was my first year as a grad student. And later on, most of those islands were not inhabited. But later on, I got really interested in the inhabited islands of Kiribati as well. So I decided I wanted to tell a story of this place where we had done research, but I wanted to tell a story about the people there. And it was during the class where we made the Lichen film that I pitched this story, this idea. And I didn't know who it would be about or anything. So I just made up a main character. I was like, okay, I know there's a Coast Guard. So maybe I could tell us, maybe the Coast Guard guy cares about the ocean. So I'll tell this story about Kiribati and its people and climate change and the Coast Guard guy. And then literally like 2 months later, I was helping with the class at Scripps. And my advisor told me that we were going to get a student from Kiribati to come to the US to study for a year to get her master's. So when she came, I waited a couple months and then I asked if like she would want to make a film with me about her island. So I ended up getting this grant from Nat Geo and then using that to leverage to get another grant to go home with her. So I made a documentary about her sort of leaving her island and her family and coming to the US to get a degree in marine conservation so she could go home and help her island. And I'll let the video do I love just roll the tape. Let the video do the rest of the talking. Heather, can you play the ecology of home video. Thanks. So this is just a trailer for that film. It hasn't been released yet.
My name is Takatiti Kemetai. I am 24 years old right now. I have a husband, Charlie, and also a 6-year-old girl, Marcy. I apologize for being emotional. It's been a long time to stand in front of this big crowd. Kiribati is a small island. It is my home. There is like a conflict between the traditional way and the Western way. There's something that we lost. It is very important to have some skills and knowledge to manage our own marine resources. So I went to the US and studying is not that easy, but I have to be strong for my daughter and for my country. Islands which use traditional methods have more higher increased percentage in fisheries productivity, coral reef, and CPUE. I had to come back from the US because I have a special connection with my island. There are a lot of stories and myths about the ocean, but my daughter is into more Western stories like Finding Dory and mermaids. She would say, "Mom, if you're going to conserve and protect the coral reefs, you're also protecting the home of mermaids, right?" I think if we can combine the traditional way with the Western way, then that's how we can move forward. If we have the engagement in this kind of project, we're going to have community buy-ins. Being a pioneer is not an easy road for me. In our manepe, like where they make decisions, there's no place for a woman. They always sit like behind the man. They say that we have to stay at home and cook, but we have to stand up for ourselves and we have to be more involved in decision making. I think I can be the first to convince them.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's, I think you never really know where inspiration is going to come from, but I felt really lucky to be able to help her tell her story. And she's actually since gone on to get her dream job working for the government in Kiribati, and had a second daughter, and now takes her daughters with her, doing field work and traveling from island to island and helping her community assess their fisheries technology and looking at like the old traditional way and then the more modern way. So I loved making that with her. And that's something that I've actually I've done a lot more of and has become a lot more important to me is authentic storytelling. So finding, helping people tell their stories and making the story together, rather than like the traditional documentary method where you're just like reporting on something. I'm interested in a more collaborative storytelling model, which I think is kind of a new thing for this generation of science communicators. And that's a lot of what I'm doing now. But I want to plug a couple more fellowships too. So after I made that film, I started the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, So that's something that's available to anyone. I think you can be an undergrad, master's, or a PhD student. And I think you can apply up to a year after you've defended your PhD. And it was a year after I had defended. And it was also my second time applying. So feel free to apply to things multiple times, because the first time I got rejected and the second time I got in. And what that fellowship does is it places science students in different media outlets all over the country. So a lot of them are in DC, but they're also in small papers in Idaho, the Dallas Morning News, St. Louis Dispatch, National Geographic, but I was placed at the Washington Post. And it's just a summer and it's not enough money to live on. But it was an amazing fellowship. It was incredible. Like the best work experience of my life. I was like in the newsroom at the Washington Post with my little like cubicle, and I loved it. I did only writing for that, but I did make one video, which I forgot about and I found when I was preparing this talk. And I'm gonna share it with you guys, even though it's not representative of my experience at the Post. It's me and my dog. But most of what I did there was learn like hardcore science reporting. I did a story on liver disease. I did a story on a whale shark that was killed in a red tide. So I want to say that I did serious science reporting for this fellowship, and that is what most people do. However, at the end of that fellowship, I made a video with a woman who was, at the time, she was making science videos for kids at the Washington Post. And I will also say that one of my goals for the fellowship was to sneak my dog into the newspaper. I have a very charismatic dog. And I actually did get his thumbnail in. I wrote a very sad article about a dog food, grain-free dog food that was was bad for dogs' hearts, and a couple dogs died from eating this grain-free dog food long term. And we didn't want to use we didn't want to upset anyone by using their dog in a dog food article where the dogs didn't make it. But my dog doesn't care, so we use my dog. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, so we made this video about how dogs see color. And so I helped report the science in the piece, but then the woman who hosts the show, her dog was just like she's like, it won't be good on camera. We can't use my dog. So we use my dog. This is for kids. This is a silly video.
Is this the Washington Post one that you sent?
Oh yeah, sorry. This is the Washington Post one. Yeah, thanks. Hey Anna.
Hey Kate. Who's this?
This is Banjo.
Hi Banjo.
And I was wondering, what would it be like to see through his eyes?
That's a great question. You guys actually have a lot in common.
Yes, I knew it, BFFs.
But there are some differences. Let's see the world through his eyes for a second. We can use these handy dandy doggy vision glasses. The first thing you'll notice about dog vision is that they don't see as much color as we do. But they do see some color. You see, the eyeball has millions of light-sensing cells that all do different jobs. Mammals have what are called cone cells to sense color. Humans and other primates have 3 cones, but dogs only have 2, so they mostly see yellows and blues. The other main difference between human and dog vision is our field of view. You both have binocular vision. That's when the field of view for your 2 eyes overlaps. Each of your eyes sees something slightly different, and you can test this yourself. Focus on an object and then cover your right eye. Position your finger so it's blocking that object. Now switch eyes and cover your left eye. It looks like the position of your finger has changed.
Magic.
This essentially gives us a certain degree of binocular vision. For dogs, it's 60 degrees, but for humans, it's double that. Our front-facing eyes help us hunt for food, in part because our binocular vision gives us depth perception. Depth perception is kind of like 3D vision. It allows us to better judge the distance between objects. Just try catching a ball with an eye patch on. It's way harder. That's why animals with depth perception are particularly good at catching fast-moving meals. But for some animals, maybe it matters less. A cute bunny, for example, doesn't need to catch a fast-moving piece of fruit. Instead, it might be more worried about detecting predators. So bunnies have eyes on the sides of their heads, so they have a really wide field of view to spot threats from any direction. You and Banjo both have front-facing eyes, so while you may not see eye to eye on everything, your vision may be more similar than you think.
Thanks for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Maybe this will help us with our fetch game.
Nothing can help you with your fetch game. Do you have a question about animal vision? Let me know in the comments or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video.
Hooray! Yeah. So there's a big range of things you can do with science communication, from like serious documentary style videos to more fun, playful YouTube style. So once I did that fellowship, I actually went full-time freelance. So writing and video both. And that was when Tiny Beaker really kind of took off. And I ended up getting a contract with National Geographic Education and making 8 videos with them. Actually with some of the guys from the original class I took during my PhD, the one where we made the Lichen film. And that one was really cool. We traveled around the US and met National Geographic explorers and made videos about their work. And what I really liked about that series was it does a lot of what I still do today, which is telling the scientists personal stories while communicating their research. So this is more of a career talk. I'm not like giving you guys a talk on how to tell science communication, although I'm happy to answer any questions on that. But one thing I will say that I'm really passionate about is getting the like human narrative in at the same time as you're teaching the science. I think getting people to connect to each other first is a really helpful skill. Yeah, I think sometimes giving talks on like instructional talks on science communication are a bit tough. I think it's better to have it be more interactive and like have you go make a story and then come back and share it. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about that. So I will show, how much time do we have? I'll show like maybe like 1 or 2 clips from that series. The first, well, maybe can we show the, can you show number 2, the Carter Clinton one, Heather? Yeah, and then maybe I'll show, actually, maybe if we're short on time, let's just show, I want to leave time for questions. So maybe let's just show Pardee's, the beginning of Pardee's, because it's shorter. We'll just stop hers after like 1.5 minutes. Because, so before you start, so
Research wasn't going that
this,
well.
I like
and
this
having
video
trouble.
because, oops. I like this video because it does what I love to do, which is show scientists, you know, like all of us don't just have, well, actually some of us do just have one interest, that's true. But like some scientists are interested in multiple things. And I really liked how this scientist in particular, she's an artist and a scientist. I made this video before the pandemic. So we're not gonna watch the whole video because I actually can't stand to hear her. She talks about what a virus is and how an outbreak works and how you stop it before it spreads. And I like can't even watch. I did watch it today, but I can't watch the whole thing. So we'll just show the beginning part because I love how it talks about her as an artist and her as a kid. And that's a lot of what I like to talk about with scientists. But I think it's not quite at the beginning. Heather, can we start at the beginning? Thanks. And then, yeah, cool.
Early on when my research wasn't going that well and I was having trouble, people would be like, well, she's in a band. But then when my research started going well and I started publishing, they'd be like, wow, and she's in a band.
1, 2, 3, 4!
People think that you have to be one-dimensional to be a scientist, but actually your science gets better when you stimulate your creativity, your curiosity, all of that. So to me, actually, doing music helps me be a better scientist. I'm Pardee. I'm a geneticist, and I'm a National Geographic emerging explorer. I use math to dissect the genomes of viruses, to decode them and understand how they evolve, how they spread, and ultimately how to prevent infectious disease and prevent outbreaks. So, I was born in Tehran, Iran. I came here when I was just a little girl, and the middle school me was just a little girl who loved math so much. I just loved the logic and the puzzles, and just as soon as I kind of really got into it, I never stopped. Math is it's a powerful tool to mine vast amounts of data, and genomics is just thousands, millions, billions of letters that you're trying to decode, decipher, using math, using computers. So that's what I do, and that's what I love. So a virus is a microscopic thing that can infect us and can cause a lot of harm, can make us very sick.
We all know what a virus is now. Yeah, so that's what I was doing, and then I and that's the kind of work that so the fellowship that I'm doing now ends in September, and I'm already starting to sign up for work doing more of those kinds of videos for people. So like meeting with scientists and telling their story. That's the kind of work that we're doing. But I will also tell you about one more fellowship, which is the AAAS Science Technology Policy Fellowship, which is what I'm doing right now. So this fellowship is open to, you have to have a master's or a PhD, but you can apply at any point. So you can be a professor and take a sabbatical to do this fellowship, which a lot of people do. It does pay really well, so that is helpful. And it also pays at the level that you're at. So if you're a professor, you'll actually get paid more than if you just finished. So depending on what grade level you are. Anyway, so what it does is it pairs scientists with federal agencies in DC. So that means like NIH, NSF, DOD, the Department of Defense, the State Department, all the federal agencies can take AAAS fellows. And you basically, in some cases, you get hired on as a federal employee. In some cases, you're a contractor. But you basically become an employee for a federal agency and you get to learn about policy. There's also, that's the executive branch, and there's also a legislative branch where you can work in Congress. So it's a pretty amazing fellowship. Each placement is extremely different. So I was looking for more of a policy communication focus. So the position I got was maybe a little unusual, but if you're interested in policy or government at all, it's an excellent fellowship. I highly recommend it for that purpose. What I did was a little bit different. So I worked for, or I still am working for, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So this is actually the bureau that does like the Fulbright program and stuff. It does a lot of exchange programs overseas. So what I have done a lot of is working with US embassies around the world on science outreach programming. And sometimes that includes a podcast. So for a while, our office ran a podcast. So I helped with that because my video skills were easily applicable to that. But then we also ran a lot of storytelling workshops for State Department employees. And also right now we're running a storytelling program for alumni internationally. So at one point I woke up at 3 a.m. to attend a class with students who were in Asia. And we have, yeah, they're all over the world now. And then the biggest program that that just launched officially 2 weeks ago is called Farmcraft. So we took the really popular video game Minecraft, and we hired some video gamers to mod it for us. So they've made a State Department world for us in this video game. And so now we have students competing all over the world, like kids, like age 8 to 18, are signing up, and they're competing to build the best farm. And it's in conjunction with the US Agriculture Policy Office. So they're learning about US agriculture, which means they're learning like what is genetic engineering and like how does agriculture work and what are the trade-offs between, you know, using a fertilizer versus using a GE crop. But they're also like getting to play this fun game. And then in addition to that, I found scientists. So every other week we have a scientist come on and we do like a Twitch style live stream where we get the scientist to play the video game, and the scientist gives a talk about their research on soil health or entomology on bugs. But they do it while playing the video game with the educators who are playing the video game with them. So it's like a really fun, creative way to give a science talk. And I can send you guys a link for that if you want to tune in. We're at quarter to the hour, so I won't play the trailer for that because it's like whatever. But if you guys want more information on that, I am happy to share it. Okay, so that's my like sampler of my unconventional career. I hope it was helpful. I'm happy to talk about like any parts of that, like policy, communication, whatever, but I'd rather just open the floor because I'm sick of hearing myself talk. So happy to take any questions.
That's awesome. That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So does anyone have questions for Kate in terms of her work, her career path, what she's doing next? Who knows? And maybe while people are putting their questions together, I had one, which is one of the things I struggle with is in how I think about sharing sort of my work and sharing some of the messages that I'm trying to get across, particularly for a lot of the work that you and I both do in, you know, the Indo-West Pacific or a developing country, is how do you share a story without it feeling like exploitative? Like, here's a video of, you know, people living in a remote tribal village, and like, look how unique and different this is. And like, how do you share an authentic view of their world without sort of feeling like a parachute scientist that's like coming in, like taking images, taking data, taking stories, and then bringing it back to like talks amongst your friends and selves? And that's something that I really, really struggle with. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on it. You know, as somebody that gets to work in a lot of amazing places and meet a lot of amazing people, how do you tell those stories?
That's a really good question. No, I've actually been thinking about that a lot, and I made, it hasn't come out yet, but I just made, I'm doing a video series with Scripps Oceanography right now. And we just filmed season 2 of this series we have called Wavelengths, which I didn't share with you guys because I'm on camera for it and I just couldn't stand to do it. But we interviewed an anthropologist, and so I've been working with Indigenous communities for a while. However, the Kiribati community, they don't like to identify as Indigenous. And I was like, that's fine. I won't use the word Indigenous. And I never really thought about it. And then I just interviewed this anthropologist a couple weeks ago, and she said, well, the thing is, the word indigenous is already framing the people in terms of colonization. And I think that just sort of is humbling to think about. So just the thing is, if you're going to tell a story that's not your story, which as a storyteller, I'm constantly telling stories that are not mine. I think the best thing to do is to ask the person whose story you're going to tell at the very beginning. The thing is about science, when you go to a place where you don't live and you do the science and then you want to tell the story of that science in that place, it's pretty hard. So I guess I would say, don't use images of people without their permission, number one. But number two, while you're there, if it's possible to make time to meet with them and talk to them, and kind of get their story and their permission in the first place, that's ideal. And then even better would be if you're going to do research in a place, in another place, it would be so cool, I think, if the university offered fellowships so that people from the places where you're doing research could join you as a scientist in training, or a citizen science program where you're bringing them on, you know, to share stuff with them that way. Just like I think the key to authentic storytelling is not to just do something to make it look better, but to actually make an effort with money and time to spend time with the people, and have it be more of a conversation and more of a collaboration, rather than trying. It's pretty hard if you've already done the trip to piece it together on the back end. So if you've already done the science and you weren't able to make the time for that conversation and all that stuff, I would just leave the people out of it and just tell the story of your science. There are a lot of rules for working with different groups of people. And so the best thing to do is just to try to understand, meet with them and understand and give them the time and whatever you can. But if you've already done it and you aren't able to do that, I would just, usually people would prefer it if you don't tell their story at all. And you just talk about your science. That's my white lady advice.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm also happy to help. If anybody is wanting to have these conversations with people, I'm happy to help with that too. Listening, I think, is my number one advice.
Other questions?
I have a question. Hey, Kendall, you can go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, I'll try. It's kind of a complicated question, but practical. So have you had experiences like working with communities that have experienced some kind of trauma around science? And then is that, I'm thinking in particular of a group that we'd like to hear their voice in terms of they were kind of embroiled in some like ocean fertilization experiment, putting iron in the ocean to try to increase their fisheries, an Indigenous community in Canada. And we'd like to like bring their voice in when we're talking about ocean carbon uptake, right? But I am having trouble like figuring out how even to broach the topic with a community that might have been traumatized by their experience in that way. And so I've just been like agonizing over even the first step. And I'm curious, like if you have advice on that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow, you guys, these are really tough topics. The thing is, there are a lot of people who just won't want to talk to you because the trust between the community and the science is broken. So in the case of Kiribati, I thought that would be a climate change story, because Kiribati is actually one of the first countries that's going to go completely underwater from climate change. But like their president had purchased land in Fiji and was going to move the whole community and this whole thing. And because of that, they became super famous for this one thing, which was that their island was dying. And so they didn't want to talk to anybody about climate change. They were super mad about it. They didn't care about it. And I met this woman and we became friends, and I told her story, and she didn't want to talk about climate change, and nobody else did either. And she didn't want to deny it, but like I didn't tell the story I set out to tell. I told her story. And that wasn't my original goal, but I changed it because that was what they wanted. So I think you can try to reach out and just connect with them without an ask. Like maybe I would kind of ask like, why do you want their voice in the story? Well, would be my question. And then I guess depending on the answer, I would say like exactly how to do it. But I think initially would just be to make contact with them and introduce yourself and say you're working on this project, and just ask if you could chat with them. So like I said, everything's very specific to the community, but a lot of the communities I've worked with, it's about meeting with them and their leaders and just listening. And it's like a long, kind of a slow process, and they may or may not give you permission. So like UCSD, the anthropology video we made, the Kumeyaay people, UCSD stole the land that UCSD is on, right? And so the Kumeyaay people are pretty angry with UCSD about it. And like, just like trying to repair that and like find an elder who will talk to you. It's just like a slow, gradual process. I am not an expert in this, but I am happy actually to put you in touch with a few colleagues who are working with Indigenous people, with Native American people at UCSD too, if you would like. But I would I would think about like exactly what the ask is from them and why you want their voice in the piece, which I think would be great. Sounds great. But
thank you so much. I enjoyed all your videos too.
Kendall, are you still there?
I'm here. That was really great, Kate. Thank you so much. So my question, how much time do we have? I'll edit my question based on time. So
like five more minutes.
I tend to ask really obnoxious questions. So, all right. I'm really interested to hear about your own reflections on your own sensibilities in terms of how you approach your stories, because, okay, so I'm a journalist who people label as a science communicator, and I'm also a documentary filmmaker. And I really resist being labeled a science communicator, but then I ended up teaching science communications. So it's all, it's all sort of woven together. But the reason I kind of resist is because of my training. And there are different sensibilities. So I can tell from somebody's training, where they've come from, basically, without having ever met them. I think your work is fantastic, by the way. So I'm really interested to hear what you've learned about your own sensibility and how those sensibilities change or are forced to change depending on the topic and the people, the subject matter. I know you said you don't really like to talk about yourself, so sorry, I'm the same way. But I'm really interested to hear sort of, your thoughts on sort of the nuances around sensibility.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what you mean by sensibility, but I think you mean like how I identify as a journalist versus like a communicator, because there is definitely like a thing happening there.
I think I'm more interested in learning about the way that you think about how you see the world. And so what you've learned when you look at your work, because your stories are told a little bit differently depending on the context and the space and the people. Like some stories you tell, and then some stories you let be told to you.
Yes. Okay. So I would prefer to let the person whose story it is, to let them tell their story. I don't think the times that I'm in front of the camera are the times that we feel like it's helpful to have a host and hosts are expensive and I'm not. So sometimes I'm in front of the camera because I'm usually like the writer and producer on the piece, and we don't have the funding to hire like a professional actor. So it's just me. That said, I mean, what I'm really passionate about is like the authentic storytelling. So what I'm really interested in doing is collaborating with people to tell their story, in which case it's their story and I don't really need to be involved. And that's more the, I don't know. Yeah, I go back and forth on journalist and science communicator too. I think the detached storytelling that happens like with the journalism training I got at the Post, I don't know if it really works for authentic storytelling, particularly with like Native American, like with not a non-American story. I'm American. So I like doing it more empathetic, more I'm gonna connect with you and we're gonna get to know each other and I'm gonna help you tell your own story. That's what I'm really interested in. I also am interested in like helping scientists tell their story in a lighter way, or like a more engaging animated way. And in those cases, I'm in front of the camera to sort of help with a bad joke and like a goofy face. Yeah, it sort of depends on like what the ask is in the like what the contract is asking me to create. But yeah, the not me in it. I mean, whatever. I'm comfortable in front of the camera, but only if it's gonna make the video like do what we need to do. Writing is what I'm really, and producing is what I'm really passionate about. I didn't show a lot of the videos. I'm in like, I hosted a lot of videos. I didn't show you guys. I'll send you here. I'll give you guys my website. You can look it up on your own time. But yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your question, Kim?
Yeah, so it just sounds to me like you're more invested in a relational approach as opposed to a transactional approach, which is what you would be doing at, a traditional news agency. But,
Yeah.
The Post and the Times are changing. The Times definitely. I mean, OpDocs has changed the game completely. And I just appreciate what they're doing in terms of letting us be honest about our high levels of subjectivity in relation to the subjects and the subject matter. So yeah, and I think that's the direction we're going. Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead. I didn't interrupt you.
No, I was just saying I appreciate your comments and so I teach this and I find that my students can't put their finger on their own sensibility. Like they just know it, but they can't articulate it very well. And I love to hear people articulate it so that, once you have language and words and a framework, I think that you can sort of play on that a little bit more and you can expand it. And so yeah, that's nice. Lovely. Well, congratulations to you. Thank you for doing your work with the Fulbrighters. I'm a former double Fulbrighter myself, and I got there via film.
Oh, cool.
So I got to go and make films in other countries. And so, yeah, I'm glad you're doing that work too.
Congrats. That's awesome. Thanks. Thanks for that question. That was a great.
All right. I think we've hit our hour. Kate has put a number of her websites in the chat field now and has throughout the talk graciously agreed to continue this conversation after this in terms of, talking about sharing science, talking about working with groups to help tell stories. So if we could all just take a minute to thank Dr. Kate Furby for coming in and sharing her work with us today. That'd be greatly appreciated.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much. Yeah, I put my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help anybody tell a story they need to tell.
And grad students and postdocs, if you want to stay on for a little bit longer chat with Kate, that's great.
Bye, Kate.